Imagine owning a port that handles thousands of containers every day. Sounds like a money printing machine, right? But the reality is shocking. Owning a port can turn billions of dollars into a nonstop financial bleed. Profits don't just come from ship fees, but also from fines for delays, storage, and detention, while debts, labor, and maintenance keep swallowing millions. In this video, we'll reveal what's behind the port's bill and why this giant project might be a financial trap for investors. Shorter and more exciting version. You see it in every documentary about global trade. The sweeping aerial shot of a seaport at sunrise. Dozens of towering cranes silhouetted against an orange sky. Massive container ships gliding into harbor like obedient steel whales. The narrator talks about the lifeblood of commerce and gateways to the world. And in that moment, a tiny fantasy sparks in your brain. What if you own one? What if you were the king of that concrete kingdom? You would charge every ship a docking fee. You would collect rent on every container. You would sit in a glass tower overlooking the water, sipping espresso, while the world's goods flow through your gates and turn into a river of cash. It sounds romantic. It sounds like a license to print money. It sounds like the ultimate passive income flex for the billionaire who has already bought the yacht and the private island. Here is the brutal truth. The fantasy is a complete lie. Owning a seaport is not a cash fountain. It is a money incinerator that happens to be located near the ocean. The docking fees you imagined? They are pocket change. The real profits come from a dirty, bureaucratic, highly aggressive side of the business that most tourists never see. And if you do not understand the hidden game of demurrage, detention, and storage penalties, you will bleed millions of dollars every single month until you are forced to sell your concrete kingdom to a sovereign wealth fund at a massive loss. So let us kill the fantasy right now. A seaport is not a toll booth on the ocean. It is a floating casino where the house always wins, but only if it owns the calendar and the clock. Act 2. The buy-in. The numbers that will make your eyes water. Before you can charge a single ship a single dollar, you need to actually build the port. And building a modern, deep-water seaport from scratch is not a business expense. It is a national infrastructure project that requires government backing, environmental impact studies, and a bankroll that could buy a small country. Let us start with the land. You need waterfront property with deep natural channels. Not a rocky coastline. Not a shallow bay. You need at least 15 to 20 meters of water depth to accommodate the newest mega ships, called ultra-large container vessels, which carry over 24,000 TEUs. 24,000 20-foot containers on a single ship. That is a floating apartment complex. The land alone, in a strategic location near major shipping lanes, will cost you anywhere from $100 million to $500 million per square kilometer. And you need at least 2 to 3 square kilometers for a medium-sized port. So just the dirt under your feet sets you back $300 million to $1.5 billion. Now, add the dredging. The ocean floor does not cooperate. You need to deepen the channel, widen the turning basin, and maintain that depth against the constant assault of silt and sand. Dredging a 15-kilometer channel to 16 meters costs roughly $200 million to $400 million, and you have to redredge it every 5 to 7 years because the ocean wants its land back. Now, the cranes. You cannot unload a 24,000 TEU ship with a forklift. You need ship-to-shore gantry cranes that stand 130 meters tall, reach 70 meters across the deck, and lift 65 tons per move. Each crane costs $10 million to $15 million. A medium-sized port needs at least 20 to 30 of these monsters. That is another $300 million to $450 million just for the cranes. Then you need the yard equipment, rubber-tired gantries, reach stackers, empty container handlers, side loaders. Add another $50 million to $100 million. You need paved container yards with reinforced concrete that can handle the weight of stacked boxes 6 high. You need a rail network to connect to the mainland. You need gate complexes for truck entry. You need administrative buildings, maintenance workshops, fuel depots. And do not forget the security systems. Ports are high-value terrorist targets. You need scanning equipment for every container, X-ray machines, radiation detectors, and a small army of security personnel. Total capital expenditure for a medium-sized greenfield seaport? Between $1.5 billion and $5 billion. And that is before you have handled your first box. But you are not paying in cash. Nobody pays in cash. You will leverage that investment with 60 to 70% debt. You will borrow from commercial banks, export credit agencies, and development funds. Your annual interest bill on a $2 billion loan at 6% is $120 million per year. That is $10 million per month. Before you have hired a single stevedore. That is the buy-in. It is not a business. It is $1 billion bet on the future of global trade, with the bank holding your mortgage and a clock ticking down to your first debt payment. Act 3. The daily bleed. The operating costs that never sleep. You have built the port. The cranes are gleaming. The first ship is on the horizon. Time to collect your docking fee, right? Let us talk about docking fees. A typical port charges between 50 cents and $1.50 per gross ton of the vessel. An ultra-large container vessel has a gross tonnage of about 200,000 tons. So the docking fee for one of the biggest ships on Earth is roughly $100,000 to $300,000 for a single visit. That sounds like a lot, but that ship has 24,000 containers on board. So your docking fee is roughly $4 to $12 per container. That is your headline revenue. And out of that $12, you have to pay for the pilot who guides the ship in, the tugboats that nudge it into the berth, and the mooring gangs that tie it down. Those costs alone eat 30 to 40% of your docking fee. Now let us talk about the workforce. Seaports are union strongholds. In the United States, the International Longshoremen's Association commands wages that make Silicon Valley engineers jealous. The average longshore worker earns $100,000 to $150,000 per year, with overtime pushing them over $200,000. And you need hundreds of them per shift. You run 3 shifts per day, 365 days per year, because the ships do not stop for Christmas. Your annual labor bill for a medium port is $150 million to $250 million. That is $12 million to $20 million per month just for the people who move the boxes. Now at maintenance. Salt water destroys everything. Steel corrodes. Hydraulics fail. Cranes break down in the middle of a lift, and a broken crane can shut down an entire berth for a week. Maintenance and repair costs run 4 to 6% of your capital expenditure per year. That is $80 million to $120 million annually on a $2 billion asset base. You are spending $7 million to $10 million per month just to stop your equipment from disintegrating. Insurance. Your port is sitting on the waterfront, exposed to hurricanes, storm surges, fires, and collisions. Your property insurance, liability insurance, and business interruption insurance will cost you $20 million to $40 million per year. Dredging maintenance. Remember that channel you deepened? Silt fills it back up at a rate of 1 to 2 meters per year. You will spend $20 million to $50 million every single year just to keep the water deep enough for the next generation of even bigger ships. Add electricity to power the cranes, lighting to work at night, fuel for the yard equipment, IT systems to track every single container, and administrative overhead. Your fixed operating costs alone, before you count any variable costs, sit at roughly $300 million to $500 million per year. That is $25 million to $42 million per month. Every month, whether a single ship shows up or not. Now, here is the leverage trap. You borrowed $1.2 billion to build this port. At 6% interest, you owe $72 million per year just in interest, plus principal repayments of another $30 million to $40 million. That is $9 million to $10 million per month in debt service. So your monthly cash burn is $35 million to $50 million every single month. If global trade slows down by 5%, your revenue drops by 5%, but your fixed costs stay exactly the same. That 5% volume dip can wipe out your entire net profit and push you into negative cash flow in less than 90 days. This is the daily bleed. This is the hidden trap. And this is why most port owners are not glamorous entrepreneurs. They are pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and government authorities that can absorb decades of losses for the sake of national strategic interests. So if docking fees are pocket change and the operating costs are a black hole, how does anyone actually make money in this industry? The answer is hidden in plain sight. It is printed in size 8 font on every shipping contract, buried under layers of legal jargon. It is the clause that gives the port the right to charge you for time. Not for the cargo, for the time the cargo spends on port property. Welcome to the world of demurrage and detention. Demurrage is the fee a shipping line charges the importer when the container sits at the port beyond the free time, typically 3 to 5 days. Detention is the fee charged when the container is outside the port, sitting on a truck or a rail car, and not returned on time. But here is the dirty secret. Many ports, especially those operated by private terminal operators, have flipped the script. They charge both the shipping line and the importer directly for storage. And they set the free time window so tight that almost nobody escapes the penalty. Let us run the numbers on a single container. A 40-foot container arrives at your port on a Monday morning. The importer has 3 calendar days of free storage. By Thursday midnight, the clock starts ticking. You charge $50 per container per day for the first 5 days, then $100 per day for days 6 to 10, then $200 per day for days 11 to 15. And after day 15, you can charge $300 per day or more, plus administrative fees. Now, consider that the average container dwell time at major U.S. ports is currently 6 to 8 days, thanks to supply chain congestion. That means the average container gets hit with at least 3 to 5 days of demurrage fees. At $100 per day on average, that is $300 to $500 per container. Now multiply that by the 24,000 containers on a single mega ship. That vessel generates $7.2 million to $12 million in storage fees for a single visit if every container overstays by just 5 days. Compare that to the docking fee of $300,000. The storage fees are 24 to 40 times larger than the docking fee. This is not a side hustle. This is the main event. And here is the cynical genius of it. The port does not actually want the containers to move quickly. It wants delays. It thrives on congestion. Every day a container sits in the yard, it generates pure, untaxed, almost zero marginal cost revenue. The container does not need electricity. It does not need labor. It just sits on the concrete, collecting interest at a rate that would make a payday lender blush. In 2021, during the peak of the supply chain crisis, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach collectively collected over $2 billion in demurrage and detention fees in a single year. That is $2 billion from what is essentially a penalty for being slow. And they controlled the speed. Now, let us add the second hidden profit center, terminal handling charges. Every container that enters or exits your port pays a handling charge. This is a fee for moving the box from the ship to the yard, and from the yard to the truck or train. The average terminal handling charge globally is $150 to $300 per container. On a 24,000 TEU ship, that is $3.6 million to $7.2 million per vessel. But here is the magic. The actual cost to move a container from ship to yard is about $40 to $60. The rest is pure margin. You are charging $200 for a service that costs you $50 to deliver. That is a 75% gross margin on 70% of your volume. Then there is the third secret profit center, warehousing and logistics leasing. Ports own massive tracts of land adjacent to the water. That land is not just for container stacking. They build huge distribution centers, cold storage facilities, and cross-docking warehouses, and they lease them to freight forwarders, logistics companies, and retailers at premium rates. A 100,000 square foot warehouse near a major port can lease for $15 to $25 per square foot annually. That is $1.5 million to $2.5 million per year per warehouse. A medium port might have 50 such warehouses, generating $75 million to $125 million in annual rental income. And the construction cost? About $50 to $100 per square foot, which you financed at 4%. The rent covers your debt service and then some, leaving you with a 10 to 15% cap rate on industrial real estate that appreciates every single year. Now, let us talk about the fourth secret weapon: chassis and equipment rental. You do not just lease space. You lease the chassis that move the containers. You lease the refrigerated units, called reefers. You lease the empty container storage space. Every single piece of equipment has a daily rental rate. A chassis rental costs $25 to $50 per day. A reefer plug-in at the dock costs $100 to $200 per day. Empty container storage is $20 to $40 per day. These charges stack up like invisible taxes on every importer. So let us total the revenue from a single mega ship visit. Docking fee, $300,000. Terminal handling charges, $4 million at $170 per box. Demurrage on 80% of boxes over 5 days, $9.6 million. Chassis and reefer rentals, $500,000. Total per ship, roughly $14.4 million. Now multiply that by the 2,000 to 4,000 ships that call at a major port every year. We are talking about annual revenues of $5 billion to $15 billion for a top-tier facility. And what are the variable costs associated with that $14.4 million? The labor to handle the boxes, the electricity for the reefer plugs, and the maintenance on the chassis. Maybe 20 to 25% of the total. The rest is pure, unadulterated operating leverage that flows straight to the bottom line. This is the secret. The port is not a shipping company. It is a real estate trust that happens to own the only driveway to the world's largest shopping mall. And it charges rent, penalties, and fees that compound faster than the interest on a credit card. Act 5. The bottom line, actual profit margin, owner salary. And is it worth it? Now, let us strip away the fantasy and look at the hard numbers. A well-run, mid-sized seaport with annual throughput of 5 million TEUs will generate roughly $1.2 billion to $1.8 billion in gross revenue. Out of that, operating expenses, including labor, maintenance, utilities, insurance, and dredging, consume about $600 million to $900 million. That leaves you with an EBITDA of $600 million to $900 million. Subtract depreciation and amortization, which is around $100 million to $150 million per year on your fixed assets. Now your operating income is $500 million to $750 million. But remember, you are leveraged. Your annual interest expense is $120 million to $150 million on that $2 billion loan. So your pre-tax profit is $380 million to $600 million. Apply a 25% corporate tax rate, and your net income is $285 million to $450 million. On a $2 billion to $3 billion total asset base, that is a return on assets of 9 to 15%. Not bad, not incredible, but solid. However, here's the kicker. Your equity investment was only 30 to 40% of the total cost, say $600 million to $800 million. With a net income of $300 million, your return on equity is 37 to 50%. Now that is a serious number. But do not start planning your retirement just yet. That 37% ROE is highly volatile. A 10% drop in global trade volume, which happens during every recession, cuts your revenue by 10%, but your fixed costs barely budge. Net income can plummet by 40 to 60% in a single quarter. And if the recession lasts longer than 18 months, you may breach your debt covenants, forcing you to inject more capital or sell assets at fire sale prices. Now, what does the owner actually take home? If you are a private equity firm or a family office that bought the port for $2.5 billion, you might pay yourself a management fee of $10 million to $20 million per year. But the real payday is not the salary. It is the dividend. After reinvesting $100 million to $150 million back into maintenance and expansion, you can distribute $150 million to $200 million in dividends annually. That means your personal share, If you own 100% of the equity, is $150 million to $200 million per year in cash, taxed at capital gains rates, which are significantly lower than ordinary income. So the owner of a successful medium port takes home roughly $150,000 to $200,000 per day. Every single day, that is $50 million to $75 million per quarter. That is enough to buy a Gulfstream jet every 3 months. But here is the reality check. You will not see a single dividend check for the first 5 to 7 years. During the construction and ramp-up phase, you are bleeding cash. You are paying interest on a loan while the cranes are still being assembled. You are negotiating with unions, battling environmental lawsuits, and dealing with local politicians who want a piece of the action. The break-even point on a greenfield port is typically year 8 to 10. The full payback period, including all debt service, is 15 to 20 years. That means you are locking up $500 million to $1 billion in a liquid infrastructure for 2 decades before you see a real, risk-adjusted return. Is it worth it? If you are a sovereign wealth fund with a 50-year investment horizon and a mandate to buy hard assets that hedge against inflation, yes, absolutely. Ports are monopolies. They cannot be replicated easily. They have pricing power. They are a bet on human greed and global consumption, which historically goes up and to the right. If you are a high-net-worth individual looking for a 3-year flip or a quick cash-out, no, stay far away. You will get crushed by the scale, the politics, and the cyclicality of shipping. The Seaport is the ultimate rich person's trap. It looks like a trophy. It feels like a fortress. But it is actually a high-stakes infrastructure game played by billion-dollar institutions who understand that the real money is not in moving boxes. It is in stopping the clock, charging the penalty, and letting the concrete do the compounding. So the next time you see a video of a massive container ship pulling into a bustling port, do not think about the romance of global trade. Think about the quiet, ruthless algorithm ticking away in the port's billing system. Think about the $300 per day per container that some poor importer is paying because his truck is stuck in traffic on the interstate. And remember, the house always wins. But in the port business, the house is not the shipping line. The house is the guy who owns the concrete, the calendar, and the clock. And he is laughing all the way to the bank. Every single day, at $200,000 a pop.